So the sermon title today is What's in Your Hand? What's in your hand? Have you ever heard a kid say, I have nothing to do? Have you ever, it never happens, right? But as a parent, sometimes I'll mention, oh, there's this activity you can do, or you have this toy, why don't you play with that? And I ask them if they want to do that, and what do they say? No, right? They say, no, I don't want to do that. And so what's my response sometimes? Okay, well, give it away or throw it away, right? Sometimes as a parent, you're just like, why do we have all this stuff if you're never going to use it? So you're just like, and of course, then they say, no, don't do that. I don't want you to throw away my stuff or give it away. But they don't want to play with it then. What about, have you ever felt like you didn't have that much? Like you didn't have that much? Maybe you didn't have a phone that someone else had? You guys ever like, I know teenagers especially will do this, they'll look at the phones and be like, oh, you have that phone's so old. And it's like, it still works, it's fine by me. But like they have this idea of like, okay, what kind of phone do you have? What kind of phone are you using? Or maybe as you get older, maybe it's someone else's furniture set, huh? You look at their furniture and you're like, oh, I don't have a furniture set that's quite like that. That looks amazing. I love their furniture set. Or maybe you're like, look at someone else's clothes and be like, oh, they always have the best clothes, and I wish I had clothes that looked that nice. It's easy to think about physical stuff and to compare. It's very easy to think about that. But my next set of questions is going to go a little bit deeper than that. Have you ever felt like you weren't smart enough? I was talking to someone this morning just about a class that they were taking, and a very difficult class, and how it can be challenging when the teacher is teaching things and it just goes above your head. What about, have you ever felt like you weren't good enough at fixing stuff? I know that I've been there many times. As much as I'll use YouTube to try and help me fix things, there's still a lot of things that I don't know how to fix, and I will screw up when I try. Or I don't know if you've ever put shelves or put things together, and then at the end you're like, oh, I put that together wrong, and you're like, I got to take it all apart and redo it to make it work the right way. What about, have you ever felt like you were not good at speaking in front of people, a group of people? I know they say that's one of people's biggest fears, is speaking in front of people. How many of you don't like to speak in front of people? There's quite a few of you. All right, the rest of you, I'll sign you up. You're preaching next week. You're preaching the weekend. What about, have you ever felt too shy? Have you ever been in a room or a place where you kind of felt like you were too shy? Or have you ever felt like you weren't athletic enough? Like there's some kind of sport or competition you did and you're just like, I'm just not athletic enough. When I was younger, I felt pretty good at most sports. So some sports I didn't understand very well, or I hadn't played much, but I felt pretty good. But as I've gotten older, there's sometimes where you're playing with kids or teenagers in different sports, and you're like, I'm not athletic enough. I'm not there anymore. What about, have you ever felt like you weren't as good looking as someone else? I know nobody here has ever felt that way, right? Or have you ever felt like you did not have any skills? Have you felt like you did not have much value? I know I grew up, I loved those personality tests. You know how they take personality tests and they can tell you all these things about yourself? I loved doing that growing up, those quizzes that evaluate who you are as a person. Have you ever taken one of those strengths finders, like tests, or the career guidance test that tells you all about you? I think about a young kid. Kids when they're young, when you talk to them for a little bit, they'll tell you the things that they are good at, won't they? Like they'll be like, oh, I'm so good at that. I can do that. I'm great at that. They're quick to share those things that they're good at. As we get older, sometimes life beats us down, and we can feel more useless. Like we can feel like we don't have much to offer. But today I want to challenge that thinking. And we're going to start by looking at Exodus 3. We're going to start. So you guys can start turning to Exodus 3, second book of the Bible. But in Exodus 3, we read about how Moses was a shepherd, taking care of his father-in-law's sheep. I'm sure that was his career goal in life, right? That's, okay, I'm going to someday get married and take care of my father-in-law's sheep. It sounds like all of our dreams, right? That's our goal in life. But all of a sudden, God spoke to him. God spoke to him from a burning bush that didn't burn up. That would be a little interesting. There's been times where, my dad used to be a volunteer fire in the fire department and whatnot, and those times where we went to fires, and when you see fire, it burns houses, it destroys buildings, and so this, in the desert region or in this region where he was at, I'm sure there was times where bushes burned up, and it was like, okay, that happens. But when you look and you see something burning, and it's not burning up, all of a sudden you're like, what is going on? It becomes a little bit different. All of a sudden you're like, I got to see what's happening. So he went over there and he was by this burning bush, and then God started speaking to him, which is incredible. God told him, go back to Egypt before the leader of the land and confront him. And after that, he said Moses would lead the people out of slavery to a new land. That it's like, okay, you're gonna go to a new land, you're gonna lead the people out of slavery. But in Exodus 3:11, Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. Now that should be enough right there, right? I'll be with you. I mean, if you're doubting, and all of a sudden God says, I will be with you, that should be enough to be like, all right, I'm good. Say no more, God. I'm done. I'm going. I'm doing what you tell me to do. And he said, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, well, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what's his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. And then Exodus 4, starting verse 1, it says, Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? That, it wasn't like a rhetorical question. It was like, what's in your hand? And Moses was like, a staff? I mean, it's kind of interesting when you think about it. It's like, well, can't you see what's in my hand? It's like, obviously this is in my hand. It's like, okay, if I'm holding this, what's in your hand? Well, a water bottle, It's like, what's in your hand? Moses said, a staff. The Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Like any normal person, right? We would run when we see a snake on the ground. Then the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. All right, so this is where I'd be like, all right, God, I understand you're doing something awesome here. This is crazy. But are you serious? You want me to reach down and pick up this snake? I just ran from the snake. I don't go near snakes. First give me a machete. Give me something to kill this. I don't want to pick up this snake. But he says, pick it up. So Moses listened to God, reached out, took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Then the Lord said, put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, the skin was leprous. It became white as snow. It basically had like a disease. Now put it back into your cloak, he said. Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. So when I think about this, when I think about Moses had nothing. He had nothing. He had lived in Egypt as an adopted son in the royal household. They were trying to kill him, but he grew up in the royal household. It's like, okay, I've got it pretty good. Things are going to go well for me. But then one day he saw one of his people, a Hebrew guy, getting beat up by the taskmaster, by the person that was in charge, and Moses was ticked, and he killed the guy. He wanted to protect him. So then, what did he do? He fled. Moses fled for his life. He didn't know, I'm going to get killed for killing this guy. So he fled. He ran away. He had nothing when he left. He had no flocks, no money, no land. He had nothing. So when this happened, Moses listened when God spoke. He didn't all of a sudden hear God speaking and say, nope, sorry, God, I'm gone. I'm going the other way. He listened. He conversed with God. Moses, though, had doubts, and he struggled with his thoughts about his abilities. He had a lot of doubts. Have you ever had doubts like that before about your abilities? I know in verse 10 it says, Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. And now one of my favorite lines of scripture is said in response to Moses. And the Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouth? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. That's quite the rebuke. God, he pulls no punches here. God is telling Moses, hey, I'm the boss. I'm all powerful. I'm telling you, this is what you're supposed to do. And what does Moses say? Verse 13. Moses again says, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. Have you ever been there? Have you ever had something you had to do in life, or that God had asked you to do, or that your spouse had asked you to do, or someone asked you to do, or your boss, and you're like, please ask someone else. I don't want to do it. Nobody, right? Nobody in this room has ever had that experience. I know I've never wanted anybody else to do something that I didn't want to do. We all sign up for the worst of our lives, right? So he said, please send someone else. Do you ever get caught in your own self-pity? Does that ever happen? You ever feel so worthless that it doesn't matter what someone says to you? You still feel incapable and unable? The one thing I love seeing is that Moses and God are having a conversation. They're having a conversation. Like, it's amazing to read how this conversation happens. It's really amazing when you think about it. That's how God wants to be with us. He wants to have that conversation. He wants to have that relationship with us where he's talking to us and we're sharing like our thoughts, we're sharing our feelings, we're sharing everything. We're sharing our feelings of inadequacy, whatever it is that we are sharing it with God. But then it's interesting in verse 14. What does it say? The Lord's anger burned against Moses. And he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him, tell him what to say, and then I'll help both of you speak, and we'll teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take the staff in your hand so you can perform the signs with it. So God was angry with Moses. He was angry. But he didn't change his assignment. He was angry, but he didn't say, all right, Moses, you're off the hook. I'll go find someone else. No, he didn't. He didn't do that. This is still Moses' job. This was still his calling. This was still his purpose. This is still what he had him to do. But he did encourage him by having his brother help him and be with him. I mean, I can imagine that had to be really interesting as far as like, okay, he's going to speak to the people, but you're basically going to tell him what to say. It reminds me of, have anybody ever watched Cyrano de Bergerac? Like the classic movie, like with the guy with the long nose, and he was very good with poetry, and nobody here, wow, okay. Now I feel old. I mean, that's like an old black and white, it's a great movie. But he's very poetic, and he writes letters, and he's got this person that he loves, but he's like, okay, I'm horrible looking. She'll never, like, we're good friends, but she will never see me that way. And there was some other guy that liked her, and so then he decided, I'll give the words to him so that he can romance her. And then they went off to war, and he was writing letters on behalf of that other guy when it was really him. And so there's this whole saga, but it reminds me of that when I read about this. It's like, okay, you're going to tell him what to say, and he's going to say it. It's not his original thoughts or ideas. It's not what God's speaking to him. It's God speaking to you. You're telling him, and then he's speaking to them. So it's really interesting how in that scenario, God said, all right, I'll work with you. I'm still going to make you do this, even though you don't want to. But I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to show some flexibility towards your situation and be like, all right, look, we can work together on this. So I got a question for you. What's in your hand? What's in your hand? I know some of you might have a pen, some of you might have coffee, you might have a book, right? Everybody's like, get stuff out of my hand. I've got nothing in my hand. Well, think about it. In 1 Samuel 17:40, it says, talks about this. Then he took a staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. So what's that talking about? That's talking about David. David had a slingshot. He used a slingshot to defeat the giant Goliath, this warrior. He didn't have the newest, greatest weapon. He didn't have some Iron Man suit to make up for his lack of size compared to his enemy. He had a slingshot and his faith in God. And he knew Goliath was talking bad about God, and he was sick of it. He's like, I'm sick of hearing him talk bad about God. Isn't anybody going to stand up to him? Isn't going to put him in his place? And he didn't, he was outmatched, but he was like, I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to go with what I have. And it's interesting because he was familiar with it. It's something he used on a regular basis, the slingshot. So sometimes you think about it, it's like, okay, why would you use a slingshot when you could have a sword and you could have all this stuff? Well, a sword he wasn't familiar with, he wasn't using. Sometimes we like to be familiar with what we're using, right? We like to use something that's like, okay, I'm used to doing this. You work a job for a while, you get used to doing that, and you get more comfortable. It's like, okay, I can do this. I can use this. This is what God's given me the ability. I can do this. I know how to do this. Versus if you get put in a different area, a different department, and then you're said, all right, go. You're like, wait. Are you going to explain? Are you going to teach me? It's like that. David's like, this is what I know. Think about it. In John 6, starting in verse 1, it says, sometimes after this, Jesus crossed the far shore of Galilee, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? I don't know. What's your favorite bread? You guys have a favorite bread? Just yell it out. Sourdough? What else? What else you got? Italian bread? Any other favorite breads? You guys like warm bread? Like when it's like fresh and it's like, it's delicious. It's like, oh, I love that. I love that. And so, Jesus is asking him this, and I'm sure he's thinking like, what? Like, what kind of bread, Jesus? And where am I going to get this bread? Like, all these things. And, but he asked it, of course, to test him. He already knew what he was going to do. But Philip answered, it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have one bite. One bite. 6 months' wages. What do you, like, Jesus, do you understand what you're asking? Where's this money coming from? Where are we going to buy this? How's this going to work? I don't know about you, but like sometimes when you're preparing for a feast, you want to know that you're going to have enough food for everybody. If you're having a Thanksgiving meal, right, you're making sure to check all the boxes. Okay, you got turkey, you got this. You want to make sure you have everything. You want to make sure you have enough for how many people you have coming over. And so Philip was like, all right, I don't know what you're talking about, Jesus. Like, this isn't going to work. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will that go among so many? Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. It's not including women and children. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. So this wasn't just one bite. This was like, hey, it's buffet time. Come on out. Eat as much as you want. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. So the boy had a lunch, and Jesus fed thousands of people with it. Do you have food? Do you have a lunch? Do you have a sack of lunch? Like peanut butter and jelly sandwich? What do you have in your hand? I think about 2 Kings 4 and the widow's oil. It says, the wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves. Elisha replied to her, how can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? Your servant has nothing there at all, she said. Then she was thinking, oh, except a small jar of olive oil. I got a small jar of olive oil. Elisha said, go around, ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Borrow them all. Then go inside, shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to the side. She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, bring me another one. But he replied, there is not a jar left. Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, go, sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left. The widow had lost her husband. Elisha asked her, what do you have? It's so interesting how she said, oh, nothing. Oh, yeah, except for the small jar of oil. She remembered there was one thing she had. My question is, what do you need to be reminded of? You have a skill. You have a passion. You have a personality that was given to you by God. That was given to you by God. You have ability, even if you forgot about it. It's easy to forget about what we have or what we have done. But God has created you for a purpose, for a reason. In 1 Peter 4:10, it says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Whenever you get down on yourself or you feel like you are too weak, I want you to remember this verse. This is my favorite verse in the Bible. It's 2 Corinthians 12:9. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. His grace is sufficient. We rely upon him. It's all about him. You look at these stories, it's all about God. He's given each person talent. He's given each person personality. He's given people passions. He wants you to use this for his glory. But again, we always rely upon him. We always go back to him. We always give him praise. We always give focus back to Jesus. It is all about him. He's the one that's given gifts. He's the one that's given talents. He's the one that's given skill. He's the one that's given us money. He's the one that's given us food. He's the one that's given us. And it's given to us to give him glory, to give him praise, to share with others, to encourage others, to lift others up, to help them to see Jesus' love for them, to help them be drawn towards Jesus. That is why he gives it to us, is so that we can direct it back to him, so we can give it back to him. It's all about Jesus. Today, we need to be reminded of who God is. We need to be reminded that he is the miracle worker. He is our purpose in life. He is the one that created us. He loves us. You are still breathing today. You're still breathing. I can hear some of you breathing. You guys are still breathing. So walk in that confidence. Not in your own pride, but confidence in who God is and who God made you to be. You know, if David was so distracted by the fact that he wasn't a soldier and didn't fit in Saul's armor, he never would have realized that he was prepared for battle with his slingshot that he used on a regular basis. Believe in God. Believe in who he made you to be. He has a purpose for you. He's already given you what you need. And he's asking, what's in your hand? What's in your hand? So we're going to pray in a second here. Hazy, would you come up, and we're going to do that last song, I'm Available, again. And after I pray, I just want to invite you guys during that song just to come forward. If you want to say, like, God, I'm available, that, hey, God, use me, I just invite you to come forward during that song and just to worship God, just to talk with him, just to have him talk with you. And when we're done with that song, then we'll dismiss and we can go. But I'm going to just say a quick prayer, and then we'll do that song together. God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your love. Jesus, I pray that you would move in a powerful way in our hearts and our lives. God, we want to say that we're available, that we are waiting upon you. Jesus, thank you so much for your love. Thank you so much for your presence. Jesus, move in a powerful way in our hearts and our lives today. Jesus, help us to always rely upon you. Know that it is by your strength, not by our own. Jesus, you are worthy. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Amen.